Hello. Thank you all for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'm sorry we didn't have a break before this talk, so everyone kind of give yourself a minute to shake it out if you need to. After an afternoon of exciting presentations by people who are building things and making things, now it is time for the presentation by the lawyer to tell you the law things, but we'll try and make it interesting anyway. And then I should also apologize in advance to the translator. If you are listening to me in Japanese right now, I did not submit this talk in advance, so the person speaking in your ear is working hard for you right now. So thank you for that. I'm Michael Weinberg. I am the general counsel of a 3D printing company called Shapeways, and I want to talk a little bit about what's really happening, what we're seeing on the ground in terms of fabrication and making and doing, and then talk a little bit about how intellectual property and licensing and some of the legal structures around making and sharing are working and could work and sometimes don't work, and talk about those things. Just to give you some background from my vantage point. So Shapeways is a company that, as I said, is a 3D printing company. We don't make rep wraps or things like that. We actually have a couple of factories full of industrial 3D printers that are like person-sized printers that print in metal and all sorts of different materials. And so people either design things and upload it to us and we print it and we ship it back to them, or they design things and they upload a virtual store. And then someone else comes along and buys it and we send the buyer the object and we send the designer some money. And because of where we sit in the fabrication world, as you can imagine, we see everything. We see people making all sorts of things. We see what works, we see what doesn't work, and we really get this opportunity to understand how all of the pieces fit together. And so that's where I'm coming from in terms of the vision of the market right now. I'm also the president of the board of the Open Source Hardware Association. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And so we're really in a position where what we're seeing is not just what people can do with this technology, but what they actually do with the technology. This is going to be a talk, and so I want to give a little bit of sort of some context, some examples. What are people doing with the technology right now? These are just some of the examples of things that people are doing. These are designers who have Shapeways shops, and they're selling 3D printed things. So we have incredible generative jewelry. I know some people were talking about this earlier today about giving people the opportunity to really use generative technology to build shapes that are unique and very hard to manufacture without 3D printing. We see very active niche communities. The model railroad community is very passionate about 3D printing. The custom gamer community, this is on your lower left. These are people who build their own custom figurines for all sorts of tabletop gaming. And then people who really are prototyping and then selling traditional products. This is a wrap for an iPhone charger. This is something that, normally if you wanted to be selling this, you need to make 10,000 units to get the tooling done. But with 3D printing, it's print on demand. So someone for basically no cost can open a shop and really start pushing this stuff out. And that gives people the opportunity to try new products and try new things and reach what may be a niche market for them, but when you aggregate it over the entire world, obviously becomes much, much larger. So I want to talk about intellectual property and digital manufacturing, and 3D printing is a subset of that. The thing that I need to start with is 3D printing and physical things are not music. So imagine, a giant red X over this photograph. This actually is a picture of my wife over there, so I felt bad making an actual X on it. But imagine an X over the screen. Everything that for the last 10 or 15 years we have learned kind of collectively as a society about intellectual property rights, a lot of it can be tied to what we've learned in music. And you can't cleanly translate that understanding to the world of digital manufacturing. Now, why is that? That's because all the conversation around music and also movies and articles and photographs and all of these things, these are all conversations about copyright. And copyright covers things like music and movies and photographs. And so when you're talking about intellectual and software, when you're talking about intellectual property and things like music, your conversation is essentially about copyright licenses. But when you're talking about physical things, you actually need to step back a stage. Before you start asking, how do I want to license my rights? First, you need to ask, do I have any IP at all? Do I have any rights at all? Do I have anything to license? Because if you start using a copyright license without any copyright, it's a piece of paper that doesn't really mean anything. And so I don't want to, however much I know that you would all love to get an hour-long lecture on different types of intellectual property, and I would love to give that lecture. I'm not going to do that to you. I'll move on to the action. But I do want to kind of overview, just thinking about this categorically, because the idea that not everything is protected by copyright, if you've been coming at this from a kind of an internet place, can be a little bit disjointing. So when you think about types of IP, right? So the first type of IP you have as a category, the first one you're going to think about is copyright. Copyright covers artistic, non-functional things. So that's why you get things like photographs. That's why you get music. This is actually like a trinket. This is a model of the US state of Texas. And it doesn't do anything. It has no function besides how it looks. And so this is something that is well within the scope of copyright. And so if I'm thinking about licensing and I'm thinking about this, I am thinking about this in copyright. And so I'm thinking about it very similar to how I'd think about it if it was a song or music. But 3D printing and digital fabrication is full of all sorts of things that are not just to look at, not just beautiful, or not just designed to have an aesthetic property. They're functional properties. So this is an example of, this is actually the plug of a bass guitar, and the plug broke, and so we prototyped and we printed a replacement. It's not designed to look nice. It's designed to do a thing. It's designed to hold those pieces in place. This is a functional object. It's not eligible for copyright protection. It's eligible as a category of things for maybe a patent. But a patent is a very different animal than copyright. And so if I'm talking about a functional object like this, and I'm thinking in terms of copyright licenses, I'm in the wrong place. And that's a really easy trap to fall into if most of your thinking about intellectual property law and licensing has been kind of in the copyright world. The third kind of IP that's worth talking about, because it's going to come up at the end, is trademark. So trademark is very different from the other two. Trademark is really about showing who is responsible for the product, who stands behind the product. So Shapeways is a trademark of the company Shapeways. When you get a box in the mail from Shapeways that has Shapeways stamped all over it, you know that the product came from Shapeways, and that we stand behind it as a company. And that turns out to become really important. It's obviously very important in all sorts of places in the economy, but it becomes really important when you think about hardware and when you think about openness. So again, you've got this first category is artistic things, that's copyright. You've got functional things, that's patent. And then you've got the name of the people behind it, that's trademark. This is a much broader universe of IP than just copyright like we learned with music. And for better or worse, if you're thinking about business models, you're thinking about IP, you're thinking about how to do this in an open way, you need to have at least an understanding that there's a difference, that it's a more complex world if you're going to try and do something new. So now I want to talk a little bit about, if you have this sort of IP, assuming you can protect something, why do people protect? Like, why do they decide to use the power of intellectual property and hold things close? A lot of times when you talk to people about why it's important to protect their intellectual property, the first thing they'll tell you is money. Like it's going to result in money. And sometimes that's true, and that's a great thing. Money's a great thing. Money is how I flew from New York to Tokyo. It's an important part of our life. But the key to this and the key to kind of all of these justifications is none of this just sort of happens. Right? If you have a product and it's protected by intellectual property, and you say, I'm going to protect and control it very tightly, and therefore it's going to make me a lot of money, you're missing a middle step. You're missing the application step. You're missing the analysis of how is holding something close going to turn into money? What's my plan? How am I actually going to activate all of this stuff? And that actually goes to the other reason that people talk a lot when they talk about wanting to protect things and hold it close. They want control. They want the ability to control maybe who uses something, maybe how it's used, maybe how it's changed. And a lot of times when push comes to shove, that control part is the really important part of holding things close. And the real reason they protect is to drive control. And again, control is not really a mechanism. It's a process to use to want to be able to impact some eventual goal. But if you're just controlling for control's sake, you're probably going to be sort of stuck in a room alone with the thing that you have and total control over it. So these are the reasons, and they're good reasons to want to hold something close. But the other side is, why share? Why decide to give up some of that control? Why potentially decide to give up some of that money, although I don't think that's a necessary trade-off. Why push things out? I think one reason that people often overlook is standardization. If you have a new thing, if you have a new product, if you have a new process, if you have a new invention, and you think it's a really good way to do it, you can push it out in the world, and you can, if it's open, if you're sharing it, if people know that they can use it and incorporate it without having to, discover they have to pay some royalty or some fee or worry about your control, you can build those things into a standard. And if you're thinking about this even from a business model standpoint, if you have an entire universe of processes or products or offerings that work really well if a standard is one way, then it may be to your advantage to open at least all of the things that feed into the standard. Because then the universe can kind of come together and align in a way that works for you, and that only works if you're open. It only works if you share. It only works if you give up some of that control and say to the entire world, I'm giving you this gift, and we can build it into the standard, and we can all work together. Another thing, and this is great, I'm glad, there have been a number of presentations now about RepRap, and I think RepRap is just a fantastic example of when you share, when you open up, two obvious things happen. One is the universe of people who are working on your problem expands in ways that you can never anticipate. And so your pace of innovation moves much, much, much faster than it would if you kept things proprietary. And that drives innovation, that drives improvement, that really drives down costs. And it also just builds out a network of people who are caring about what you're doing and who are applying what you're doing. And if you have something, if you have a new idea, if you have a new product, something you're fabricating, and no one knows about it and no one uses it, if it works for you, that's great, but it may not make the impact on the world that you want it to. If you figure out a way to push it out and build this community, that's going to make it really powerful. The other thing that will happen is unexpected things will happen. It turns out when you send something out into the world and you document it and you invite people to use it and work on it, oftentimes they will. And those people aren't you, and they aren't the people you hang out with. And so they bring a whole nother set of assumptions to what you're doing. And they can take it in directions that you never would have expected. I think that when the RepRap project started in 2008, if you had asked them to list all the things people would be doing with RepRaps 5, 6, 7 years later, I doubt you would have heard them talk a lot about printing gels. Or even printing food, or all the kinds of presentations, or giant printers that can be printing scaffolding and art installations. These are not things that the original team were thinking about, but when they pushed it out in the world, really interesting things happen. And I think when you're trying to analyze this and you're trying to work through it, it's not really an either-or question. It's not, should I protect or should I share? It's how can I integrate protecting and sharing and opening up and maybe holding things close and use these sort of in a layered, integrated way to achieve my goals. And you need to take some time to do your internal analysis. What are your goals? Is your goal to have your product in every household in the world? Is your goal to sell 1 million of them? Is your goal to change the lives of 1,000 people or 100 people or just 10 people? And then how can you use the various tools in the tool chest of protection and sharing to really impact that goal? Now, I want to give you a couple examples of how people are using different layers of openness. And these examples I'm giving you are not companies or people who think of themselves necessarily as open, as sharing companies. If you ask them all, if you asked other people, they would probably describe them as, regular companies that don't share, that hold things close. But they're companies that said, for whatever reason, they decided that it was in their business advantage to open things up. Now, like I said, I spent a lot of time with the open source hardware world. I think there are lots of non-cynical, non-kind of cold business reasons to want to open up and share. But I also think sometimes it's valuable to talk in the language of cynical, cold business terms as to why it's worth sharing. So just very quickly, this is a company called Teenage Engineering. They make synthesizers. Their synthesizers are expensive. Sometimes their switches and knobs break. The switches and knobs are cheap, but they're really hard. They take a long time to manufacture and ship to their customers. So they said to their customers, the thing we're going to share to you, we're going to share with you all the CAD files to all the switches and knobs to our synthesizer. So buy more synthesizers, but when they break, we'll sell you replacement parts, but you can also just replace them yourself. We're happy for you to do that. That's a version of openness that worked for them and really increased the value of their synthesizers to their customers. This is another example. These are all 3D printing examples. Sorry, I'm a 3D printer guy, so this is what you get. This is a company that is a high-performance gaming mouse company called Rocat. And what they did is they said, we have a mouse, it has all sorts of features, it has 20-some buttons on it, and we're going to sell you the standard button configuration. And we're going to sell you 3D print custom on-demand alternative configurations. And then we're also going to let you design your own custom button configurations for whatever you want to do, for whatever games you want to do. Again, they were inviting their community in and saying, this is what we want you to do. We want to partner with you. We want to make this better with you and be more open. Similarly, DJI, who's the drone company, they make drones. Their community is super enthusiastic about drones. And they're using the drones in all sorts of weird and unexpected ways. And so what we see is they said to their community, great, we're not going to send you scary letters that say, don't you dare make any accessories for our drones. Don't you dare improve our drones. They said to their community, please, build your accessories. Build your improvements. Tell the world about it. We will give you a big hug about it and say, this is fantastic. This is exactly what we want you to do. We'll even help promote what's going on because we know that by building this enthusiastic community of people who are engaged with our product, then by sharing with them they make everything better. Maybe we'll use some of these ideas to make our next drone better. But at a minimum, when people are looking to buy the drones from us, the drones are even better because there's this whole universe of sort of independent products that are tied to the drones. The last example, this is an example that My Little Pony, Hasbro, a company that's very much integrated towards protecting intellectual property, but they realized they had a giant fan community of people who loved their product and loved My Little Pony and wanted to create fan art. And so what did they do? Again, they didn't send a bunch of nasty, scary letters and said, there's no way that you can possibly do this. They said, great, here's a safe place. Here are the rules. If you come in, you can design and even sell fan art that's inspired by My Little Pony in this case. And we're going to open it up and we're going to share it with the community. And all of these are examples of companies that don't think of themselves as open companies, as sharing companies, relying on openness and sharing and relaxed intellectual property processes, but real intellectual property processes to improve their customers' experience and improve their bottom line. Importantly, when they made these decisions, they weren't choosing between sharing and making money. They were choosing a little bit between sharing and control, but what they were really saying is that sharing can help us get to those goals that we were talking about earlier. The process that we're going to use to achieve more engagement, more sales, a richer fan base, is to open up a little bit. And that's counterintuitive to some traditional ways of doing business. But what we're seeing over and over is when you empower your fan communities, when you empower your users, really interesting things happen. Now, I want to talk about this a little bit more in the hardware space. I suspect that many people here are familiar with Arduino and have used Arduino and use it every day. For those of you who haven't, Arduino is a microprocessor. It's sort of an electronics platform that's designed to let you do all sorts of things, including build 3D printers and things like that. And so Arduino is an open company, and you can get an Arduino that is an Arduino manufactured by the company. But they also opened up their schematics and their design files and their software. So if you want to make your own derivative of Arduino, you can go ahead and do that. And if you want to sell your own derivative of Arduino that ideally adds some new functionality to Arduino, but maybe it just sort of does what Arduino does for 30% less, you can also do that. So they gave away their IP in terms of the copyright and the software, and in terms of the patents that they didn't even get on the hardware. But the thing that they kept close was that trademark. So you can buy an Arduino compatible derivative. You can buy an Arduino knockoff. You can buy an Arduino competitor. But it will never say, it should never say, legally, that it's actually manufactured by Arduino. And that helps them drive their business because it turns out in the world of hardware, who manufactured your thing becomes really important. If I want to download Firefox, and 10 different websites compiled Firefox, it's probably, in the software world, it's basically, if they did the right thing, it's probably the same software package, right? Software is software is software. You can run a checksum against it, and it's all going to be the same no matter the source, the intermediary source. In hardware, if you give 10 different factories the schematics and the information to build an Arduino, you're going to get 10 different Arduinos. And so it's really important to know not just that it's Arduino compatible, but that this actually came from Arduino. And Arduino says this is going to work in the way that you expected. And so in the world of hardware, we're seeing an increasing importance of trademark, where people give away the ability to create, but they keep their name so they can stand behind the ones that they, in fact, created. A different tack, this is something I promised we'd get to, the Open Source Hardware Association. Like I said, I'm on the board. And there's a challenge in the world of open source hardware. So all these things that we've been talking about, open source hardware comes from the world of open source software. And one of the things that the world of open source software does is it really relies on licenses for validation. If you've spent any time in the world of open source software, you know that there can be blistering fights about licenses. But it's really important. If you say, hey, I'm open source software, someone can say, well, what license are you using? And you tell them, and that automatically serves as a way to understand if it's really open source software or not. That entire system is built on a foundation of copyright protecting software. And so the license that someone is using on the software is everything that controls your access to it. In the world of hardware, knowing what software license people used won't tell you if it's really open source hardware, because there's all sorts of additional information that you need, and there are potentially all sorts of other IP barriers to using it. And so one of the things that the Open Source Hardware Association is working on is a certification that's based in trademark to say, if it has this mark, if the hardware you see has this mark, you know that the Open Source Hardware Association stands behind it, and it's really open source hardware. We can't rely on just a license. You need some sort of mark that someone controls that says it's open for real. And then once you do that, you have all sorts of opportunities to access. Now, very quickly, I want to give you, just because this happened last week, this is a big thing that happened in the world of Thingiverse, which is a website that has all these 3D designs on it. And this is just an example of how things can go wrong because things are so much more complicated in the world of 3D design. There's a situation where a company came and scraped about 2,000 models from Thingiverse and started printing them and selling them on eBay, not complying with the licenses that were attached to the models. And what ended up happening was a huge fight between the company and all of the designers over whether or not their activity was infringing and or whether or not it was violating the community norms of Thingiverse. And the analysis ended up being a little bit complicated because the rules were complicated. People were operating in a space where the lines were not as bright as the lines would have been in the world of music or movies. And so there's a lot of room for misunderstanding, and I think clear communication is really key to working through these things, because you find yourself in a situation where a bunch of different people have different opinions. Some of those opinions make sense, some of them don't, but even the ones that make sense, there are completely valid competing views on what is right and what is legitimate. And at this early space in the time of openness and hardware and fabrication, it's really important for people to be open and communicative and working together to work towards a single norm that everyone understands. And so as you think about moving forward, if you're thinking about openness, you're thinking about IP, you're thinking about digital fabrication, I think the watchwords are pretty straightforward. First is be aware. Understand that it's not just copyright. You can't just spend time thinking about whether or not this copyright license, is the right license you want to use, because you really need to understand if you have anything to license. Once you understand that, it gives you the opportunity to be creative. Take the opportunity to understand all the moving pieces. In complexity, sometimes there's opportunity to do something that really works for you, that really builds towards your goals. And then finally, even when you think you're aware, even when you think you have a creative solution, it's important to be nimble. Because the situation may change, the facts on the ground may change, the law may change, and it's really important to stay on your toes and be able to be in a position where when things change, you understand what your real goals are, and you understand how to build a new path to get there. So that's just some information about IP and business models and openness. Thank you for your attention. If you are angry and you want to send me angry notes publicly, the best way to do that is Twitter. If you want to be angry at me privately, the best way to do it is email. So they're both up there. Have at it. Thank you so much for your attention.
ありがとうございました。はい。
Thank you very much. Then we would like to move on to the next speaker. speaker, Dr. Kobayashi, please. Then, based on the Mr. Weinbach's presentation, I would like to talk about the designing terms of use for open sourcing as a business strategy of a hardware startups. But when you hear about this, this is a very technical, very rigid legal terms. However, well, there are a lot of potential, but there are obstacles as well. So I'd like to talk about both perspectives. Now, based on the open source hardwares, and to give you some idea, what I would refer to is the little bits. Little bits using sensors, motors, or synthesizers, or Wi-Fi. All these functions be connected, combined with the magnetic connectors so that they could create the sort of electric circuits right away. So it's very easy to understand how it functions. And also by combining that, electronic music instruments, the toys or IoT devices could be structured right away. So it's not just easy, it is a very profound, and therefore this is a great business. And about 5 billion yen of funding being raised, and this company is growing as we speak. Now we have company like this, and at the very beginning, little bits, hardware, digital data, the company always took the consistent policy of open source policy. However, on the other hand, there are some areas that they will restrict strictly closed sources. So you see, this is a magnetic connector. This is a very unique magnetic connector. So these areas specifically related to brands or the core technology that has been a very closed source. So lead users created such modules. And like an app store on the smartphones, these people are able to sell such products, and they have started from 2004. So some are open source, some are closed source. So the company is controlling as such. And then the products out of it is put it onto the platform of the community. So this is a very well structured community balance. Now, together with Little Bits, when we look at the open source hardware, you might think about the MakerBots, one of the success case. The MakerBot replicator is the leading product, and since 2009 they started their business, and the business performance is growing. And at that time, personal 3D computer printer has taken off in the market, and therefore this company won a great attention. However, in the year 2011, the replicator 2, that is fully conscious of consumers area, and they have developed a very high product quality products, and the company decided to make some part of the sources to the closed sources, and that actually induced a lot of confusion. I'm not sure if this is a good way to put it. However, there are some extremists, fundamentalists in the open source community, and they criticize the company severely, particularly interface area or specific area, exterior that was the closed source area. However, it seems that this particular case was symbolic in a way that communication with the user community is very important. The hardware startups, which doesn't have much resources, when they try to grow, open source approach is very useful. However, on the other hand, the company also have to think about how they're going to keep communication with the user community. Now, let me talk about the hardware startup IXI. Well, audience here would notice that there's a prosthetic robot hands presentation right outside of this conference hall, and that's IXI. And IXI is announcing the one which uses the myoelectronic hands. This is very useful. And basically, prosthetics is a copy of a human hand, and the design variety is very limited. However, in 2014, IXI started the business, and then they used the manufacturing process such as 3D printing, and also they simplified how to change the components, and also design which could express the unique personal characters, changing the shape and the patterns. And by implementing such a combination, then they were able to provide the myoelectric hands, which is easy of the choice. Now they have raised the funding through crowdfunding and so forth and use that funds. And they are exploring the partner users, and they are developing as we speak together with the partner users. These are the core members, Mr. Konishi, Mr. Kondo, and Mr. Yamamura from the left. So these are the people who are designing and the management and the software and the hardware engineering. These are the members of IXI, the company. The March last year, South by Southwest is the festival, and they were demonstrated their products. Mr. Morikawa, who is the actual prosthetic user, presented together. He joined the presentation. This is the handy concept model. Many people were able to experience this hand. Now, IXI is gaining some more reputation for a year or so, but they face some challenges as well. This is a team of 3 people. And also the photo shows the prosthetic hand, particularly the adult right hand is the only product available. When they need the child left hand, they can't immediately provide the products because now the company is gaining popularity, and therefore they are receiving the orders all around the world, but there are only 3 people in the team that can't answer or reply the request. How are they going to develop their prosthetic hands more quickly? And that's one of the challenges. And what they thought was that design data, spec data could be the open source. However, IXI is business company, so they have to earn minimum profits in order for the survival of the company. So they would like to protect the company rights as a company, but they want to choose the appropriate types of license. On top of that, they would like to promote the use of data, but at the same time, there are some risks pertaining to the intellectual property rights as well as the product liabilities, how they could avoid and avert such potential risks. So these were the challenges of the company. Now, I've been involved in the open source hardware, and I've involved being a part of the developer as well as the researcher. So I've been working with the lawyer with in the name of Mizuno-san, and together with that lawyer, we have chosen some of the strategy for the Hackberry, and I have supported together with the lawyers for the open source strategy at the Hackberry. So this is the announcement or publishment of our initiative, and 3D data of the prosthetics hands were published, and also hand sensor and battery 3 boards data were published. And also, as Mr. Meinbach explained, Arduino is the short program that is using, and that is also opened. And we have set the licenses, and the Creative Commons by and SA were applied for the first 4 so that the original creator have been disclosed, and they will be distributed under the same conditions. If that is complied, then people will be able to distribute the data without any permission. And also for the Arduino sketch, that was a very simple one. So we decided that this should be on the public domain. So therefore, we have decided to denounce or give up the rights. So all the documents are inputted into the products, for example, the waiver of responsibility and prohibition of the use, and these were prepared together with the lawyer, Mr. Mizuno. So this is the Hackberry photo, as you were able to see at the front. And so this is a shape of 3D print services, or parts could be produced on your own using 3D printers. And if you combine all these pieces and components, and then anyone can produce this type of a hand. And this is a site publishing this data. On right-hand side, here's a very lengthy terms of use, and the Hackberry 3 photos are there on the top, and there are lengthy text here. And the first half is English, and the lower half is Japanese, and this is the terms of use. So for those of you who are intending to involve in this one, we decided to disclose this one just in a single page of website. I have talked with the XA and decided to do this way. what it says is that, first of all, we have clarified why did we choose this way, making this data on open source code so that for the patents of ICSI, by signing the licenses in this way, we are intending to promote the dissemination and the research and development related to this prosthetics. And also there are the use limits. For example, they should not be used for the military purposes and also purposes violating public order and morality, or perhaps ICSI or Huckleberry defamation or discreditation. That purpose is prohibited, and also the concern of inducing such disadvantages is also prohibited use as well. So, of course, the rights has to be clarified. So, therefore, we clarified the patents pending as well as trademark pendings. So what were the results? I am borrowing this document from ICSI, and in March, the design data was published over the internet. And after that, the first products were born in UK, London. So it's shorter than 2 months. And then that experience was posted on the TEDx Madrid, and this user communicated the open source hardware's potential. Then the circuits was a little complicated, and by making it into a kit, someone in Colorado, USA, somebody worked on making this in a kit in August. And after that, well, original model was for the adult right-hand side, and then the 13-year-old girl was given this one as a present. Somebody changed that to the girl model. And also, somebody, user themselves are trying to use it for their own and started to combine like this one. This is a newspaper journalist, and somebody tried to make it for their own. And also, this is a smaller version for their own kits, and the left-hand side, this is completely symmetrical from the right-hand side, and its size of the components will have to be also adjusted. So the whole design has to be adjusted to the smaller child version. And left-hand side, somebody in Poland in February this year started to work this one. And also, Dr. Tanaka did the Open Design Strategy. That's the lecture name held at the Teikyo University. And he has solicited the proposals for interesting use other than the prosthetics. So this is Robert's hands and eye and other parts that they explore the interesting use together with the structures. And there are so many variations available. This is originally for the purpose of 3D printers. However, by using laser cutters, the printing and forming speed has been accelerated drastically. And also when you print in the 3D printer, then this was a very complicated printing design. However, changing that design so that people can print in an easier way. So these modifications been done since we make this source to a open sources. So by publishing an open source, the startup with a party of 3, it was very difficult to expand the development to the broader scope, was easily done by the world. And in addition to the person who was presented today, there were many more people involved in developing this product. On the other hand, largest challenge was that how we could create the business out of this initiative. There's no answer at this point. It is just a beginning. And when internet was started, Yahoo, Amazon, and Google, we believe that that business model is something for granted. But at the time the company started, nobody really believed in it. And people explored, tried and errored, and therefore they now have an established business. So I think that there's for sure a potential. But how are we going to realize that to happen? We still are working. Now, to this end, we were able to achieve so far, and use limitation terms of use. We're going to publish that in templates in the near future, so that for the similar open source project, we want that term of use to be available for other people as well. Now, discussion is not simply finished here. This is the outcome we get, and that's all. And that's not what we pursue. Starting next week, South by Southwest, that's the festival held in Austin, U.S. And in the enabling the future global network of passionate volunteers in 3D printing to give the world a helping hand, we're going to do enable. This is something that could be printable on 3D printer. The prosthetics hands could be delivered to as many people as possible and as cheap as possible. So Iwan Owen, who is doing a successful project like this, and I, as well as the from the EC company, we're going to do some sessions. So we would like to discuss the potential, but we'd like to keep raising the question that should we do for the future. So that's the progress report so far. Thank you very much. Dr. Kobayashi, thank you very much. And the next is Dr. Watanabe, please.
Hello, I am Watanabe. It turned out like I had expected in advance. We are tight with our time, so I need to skip a bit, and I'm ready to go on as a follower of the previous speaker. My original time 15 minutes, but I can finish within 10 minutes. So I will be the last person to speak at this series of a presentation, because next one will be the panel discussion. So let's review what has been discussed today. We've been looking for many partners in different areas, be it the materials or the research or development, whatever. There are certain people who are looking for forms or the functions. But we have been looking for a way to provide something exactly meeting the needs of the users. We have collaborated with the users directly. And also users have some needs, but they cannot express what their needs are. So we try to extract what they've been thinking by guiding them, sort of. So we've been doing a trial and error for searching a way to innovate from various different angles. So we've been talking about the hardware startups, and we've been providing assistances to go open. So today I would like to introduce you about the Yoshisuke House of Crafts. The mentally disabled persons and the person with general disabilities have been involved, and this is a nursing care providing center to those people. Many things are undertaken. Light manufacturing is also done, in addition to providing creative social work and so forth. So that this is engagement by anyone. So we are here to support their businesses. It's just like providing services to the hardware startups, and whatever we gained as a lesson can be shared in open with the rest of the society. That is the idea. So that the workshops for the disabled persons and the Center for Disabled Persons could also be encouraged to come up with their own idea to start up an idea. So what we had learned with our center being shared. So this is a Yoshisuke House of Crafts. This is a branch where some of our researchers are working and took the pictures. So what you see on the photo are our members as well as artists working at the House of Crafts. So persons with a disability are working to make artistic pieces, and there are many pieces which have been made by the people. A part of the artistic piece have been sold on the market, like calendars and greeting cards. They are being made available for sale, and a part of the proceeds have been given back to the artists themselves. It's a worthwhile job, and they can earn some money which can be helpful for supporting their livelihood. And digital fabrication technology is something that we know, so we try to share what we know with them so that they can create something new. So we sort of providing assistances to them. So digital fabrication can have use in many different settings. And we also try to learn for ourselves the potential of digital manufacturing. And we heard from Dr. Julia Kasim at the outset This is related to our responses to the inclusive design, and we are working on this based on the paintings. The iron print, something like that, can be used as a material, and it can be carved out, and it can be rearranged. So this is a print kit, and a card game is something that we are working on. This is the iron print, what it can do. And the box shape can be variable, so that users at the center can fill in the boxes themselves at the working center. And this is what we are working on as well. As Dr. Kobayashi mentioned, together with Mizuno Tasuku, the lawyer, we are providing assistances from the licensing point of view as well, vis-a-vis the artists themselves and the workers working at the workplace, because they like to retain partially the right to the arts that they have created. So what would be the best way to derive the best value is something that people are looking for. We don't know, and they don't know, so in a semi-finished fashion, these art piece can be used for many purposes. And what can be interesting can become a good seed for future product and can be sold on the market. So a workshop in that vein is something that people want to have, so we are planning on it. And maybe licensing can be done, and the instruction material could also be written eventually. So this is an asset that artists have, and based on that asset, maybe some proceeds can be gained, helping them their livelihood. And those are the kind of services that we are providing. So if you go back, you can see that when it comes to open innovation, it does have a big potential benefit to be enjoyed by small users, because resources are limited, the number of people are limited, the experiences are quite limited. However, if the external players are made open, then they can come and be assistance to you and helper to you and provide you with a hint for your expansion. Then in the end, that you small user might be able to enjoy much bigger benefit, like crowdsourcing and so forth. Many people's wisdom can be used, and thanks to external people's contribution, like using the platform of Shapeways, it is working very nice. But it's not like that. We are just focused on the small number of people, limited coverage. And there are so many excluded people, and we can collaborate with the excluded people and provide some product that can be redefined, so that further features that will be useful for a limited number of excluded people. So benefit can be served. So here we are talking about open innovation, but in much more small way. We are talking about a good combination of the two. And of course, as we heard from Mr. Weinberg, there are certain areas where it cannot be made open. So it's just a mix of the two. Make something open and have something close to yourself, on the other hand, a mixture. So we are talking about something very young in its stage, so that last this month, very first product is to be released. That's how far we come, and proceeds are to be generated from now on, and we will look into the reaction of the users and so forth. So we have policy group, and together with them, we are also carrying out researches. Already, as Michael had only said to us in detail, legally speaking, when it comes to the usable goods, the copyright is not allowed, no exclusion right. acknowledged, but it can produce much benefit as a result of the sharing. It can open up new opportunities. And maximization of revenue is not the only goal. That is what people say in the fabrication area. So our goal is not to maximize revenue. We are looking for something worthy of doing, something to live for and so forth, something that you need for yourself or something that you need for your dear friends and so forth, or for a community. Motivation can be varied for making things, and the sharing becomes more important. So through our experiences, we can see how people are devising the tools, and maybe you can ride the wave to widen the community of innovation. And these are the areas that we are researching. So it was very short, I know, but I thank you for your attention.